1010 WOLB Baltimore and WERQ FM. HD3 Baltimore.
The views and opinions of the guest and host you hear are not necessarily those of the staff and management of Radio 1, its sponsors, or advertisers.
Welcome to the Our Legacy Matters show, where we'll discuss how to secure, maintain, and transfer wealth to future generations. I am your host, Attorney Sherry Fleming. Now let's tune in. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Our Legacy Matters show. This is Sherry Fleming. And again, I'll always say, while I am licensed as an attorney in Maryland, I am not your attorney. So I really hope that anything you hear today, you would take the time and seek the professional advice and assistance that you may need. Please feel free to call in today. The number here is 410-481-1010. Again, that number is 410-481-1010. Today, I'm answering a question that was sent to me via social media. And this question is one that I've addressed before, but I want to make sure that I address it in greater detail. So the specific question was, should I put real estate in my child's name, and that child being a minor child, because I know the person who sent the question. And so the general question again is, should someone put real estate in a child's name? I want to use this opportunity to talk about assets that are owned by minors. This is a concept that most people who don't realize exists, that it is an issue. It is a legal issue. Why? Because as a minor, you might not have owned anything. However, there are several instances where individuals who are minors own property. And so I want to discuss the pros and the cons of it and really answer the question. And so when someone asks me a question like this, my starting point is always the same. And that is, what is the purpose? Why are you doing this? What is the point of putting real estate or any asset into a minor's name? And I sit back and I listen to the reasons. Some people want to do it because they want to, quote unquote, give the minor a good start, a good financial start. And so they want to make sure that the minor has things that they own. And that is great and that is honorable, but that in itself may not be a great reason. And so one of the hot things that I want to bring up is that minors can own assets, minors can work, and minors can have income under certain conditions. However, minors are still considered not the age of majority under the law. And in some instances, that age of the majority could be 18 years of age. And in other instances, the age of the majority could be 21 years of age. So when you are putting assets into the ownership of the minor, the asset becomes the minor. The minor is in charge. The problem is that minor does not have the legal capacity to contract or make decisions regarding the asset that he or she owns. And so the authority over the asset vests in the person who has legal authority over the minor. In most cases, that is a parent. In some cases, that is a legal guardian. In more places of sophistication, maybe the person does not have guardianship or isn't the parent of the minor, but for the particular asset, that there may be someone called a custodian, someone who has custody of the asset for the purpose of, for the minor's purpose, and acknowledging that that minor has an inability to make decisions regarding that asset. And so when you are placing assets in the name, in the ownership of a minor, you are subjecting that asset to control by either one of, if not all of those parties in some cases. And so there is an intersectionality here with family law because there is a misconception when it comes to some child custody. And I'm not going to go too deep into this because I am not a family law attorney. I do not know everything, but I do know some things. And so the one thing that I do want to say for parents who are not together, who are not co-parenting on the same page, where there may be a custody agreement in place, all of those things. Absent a parent's legal rights being terminated, which is only really happens in extreme cases, at least in the state of Maryland, both parents remain having legal rights to the child. And so if a parent has legal rights, then that means the parent also has the ability to control the asset of a minor. And I do see in a lot of cases, or let me say when I do, I've done speaking engagements in the past. One of the myths that people believe in estate planning is that because they have a custodial agreement in place and one parent, in most cases the female parent, has primary custody, the wrong assumption is that the legal rights of the other parent are not intact. And that is an incorrect assumption. Custody is just that, physical custody in a lot of cases. The person who primarily provides the day-to-day care to the minor child. When we are talking about legal entitlements, that is an entirely different conversation. And so you have to be careful, particularly if there is a minor child that has an absentee parent, if there is a strained relationship between the two parents, you have to be very careful outside of death or termination of a parent's legal rights. That other parent does have the right to make legal decisions regarding that minor child. And so when assets are placed in the custody, or in the ownership of that minor child, that parent, presumably the parent that the other parent doesn't want to have access, will have access. And so that's one thing that I want to bring up. Minors can have income, minors can own assets, but minors cannot make decisions regarding those assets. And so again, what is the purpose of putting an asset in the name of a minor child? Aside from who has control of the child, has control of the asset and the money, aside from that concept, another thing that you want to consider, again, very honorable to want your child to understand ownership and to give them autonomy at a younger age. However, if you have a child who could possibly have access to entitlements later on in life, you are inhibiting or interfering with that child's access to entitlements. And so those entitlements could come in the way of scholarship money for high school, for college. Those entitlements could be seen as financial aid, access to financial aid awards, government entitlements. If you do have a child who may need greater assistance with health care, due to a disability or otherwise, having assets in that child's name could substantially impact that child's ability to access some of these entitlements they may have otherwise been entitled to. So again, I say, what is the purpose of putting an asset in the child's name? And so in this particular case, I don't know that there was a purpose. I think the question just existed because there is a lot of trend in popular culture and on TikTok and Instagram to see people purchasing land and adding their child's name to the deed, to see people purchasing their first home and adding their child's name to the deed. One of the things that we saw in popular culture, in music in particular, you see a lot of producers and celebrities who are putting their child's names for copyright or intellectual property rights in an album or in artwork. And so that you see, Blue Ivy getting Grammys at a young age. And so I think that becomes attractive to people. And people try to figure out, well, how can I do the same for my child? How can I give my child a step up? The one thing that I will first say is that celebrities have advisors. Celebrities typically, you don't get to the status of a Jay-Z, a Beyonce, a DJ Khaled in the way of wealth without having financial advisors. And so I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with doing such things. I am saying you have to know the pros and the cons, and you have to have a team of people who are so intricately involved in your financials on a regular basis that it's their career to be able to quickly tell you what is good, what is bad, what is right, what is wrong. Okay. And so if you are not of that status, even if you are, you should have an advisor. But let's say that you don't. The point of this show today is for you to begin to weigh those pros and cons. And so the first thing is your child is a minor. Outside of yourself, who else has the ability, if you are to put assets in a child's name, who else has the ability to control the asset that you have then transferred to the child? And are you okay with that? What is the likelihood that that child is going to need support in the future? Are you okay with that? Also, are you giving yourself more work to do by putting an asset in the child's name? Because again, once your minor child owns something, it's theirs. And if you as the parent are the decision maker, you are now making decisions for that asset and doing all of the paperwork necessary on behalf of that child for that asset. And there are a lot more hoops and hurdles involved in that process than one may think. And so I want to bring up the example. I mentioned in two episodes ago that my mother passed away. And my mother left an insurance policy to me and my 3 minor children. And I know she thought she was doing a wonderful thing and doing that. However, it's such a headache for me. And I think most parents will agree. When you leave something to a minor child, again, the parent or guardian has to be the one to collect and make decisions regarding that asset. And so for the portion of the insurance that was just left to me, it was very simple. I sent my photo ID, my mother's death certificate, check cut to me for that portion. However, for the portions that were left to my minor children, I had to show that I was in fact their parent. And so that required their birth certificates, that required their social security cards being sent, that required custodial accounts being set up for them. I, fortunately enough, all of my children already have custodial bank accounts. And when I say custodial bank accounts, every state, or let me not say every state, most state have adopted what's called the Uniform Transfers Uniform Transfer to Minors Act. UTMA is what we call it. And so what that means is that there's law in every state that governs how property should be transferred to minors. And in this case, a minor is anyone under the age of 21. So if someone is leaving assets to a person who is under the age of 21, there needs to be what's called an UTMA account. It's similar to your regular bank account, similar to your regular account at any financial institution, but there are a significant amount of rules and regulations which are meant to protect the minor child. And so fortunate enough for me, I already had those accounts set up for my children. When individuals give them gifts for their birthdays, I actually put those checks in the individual child's account. I don't go spend them. I save them. And really, it's my way of helping my children begin to make sound financial decisions with money that isn't necessarily mine. And so I already had those accounts set up, but to access the money that my mother left, there were a bunch of additional hoops and hurdles involved. And I remember just being so frustrated because I was just like, at the end of the day, she could have just left it to me and we would have figured it out. I'm going to take care of my kids. But I understood her heart and I understood why she did what she did. And again, it was completely her decision. And so what has happened now is that my husband and I are now custodians or fiduciaries in addition to parents. Where being a parent, you're already, making decent decisions for your kids, I guess. But we now have to have oversight over these accounts for them. And the money is essentially theirs. Now, could I go in, take that money out and do what I want to do with it? Who's watching, right? In most cases, no one's watching. However, in some cases, there are people who are watching. And when you are a fiduciary, you have to do what's in the best interest of the person whose assets you are safeguarding. And so again, I would ask, what is the purpose of, in this case, it was life insurance assets, liquid cash, essentially, because we receive checks and that money is sitting there for them we'll figure it out. What it looks like it's going to be tuition at this point, but we'll figure out how to utilize that money or even invest it. But what is the point of putting real estate in a child's name? Again, I'll just go back to that. Again, honorable to want to give your child an asset, but you can do other things to honor your child in that way. Would you buy a house for a 5-year-old? If you wouldn't buy a house for a 5-year-old to live in, by his or herself, why would you then put their name on a parcel of real estate? There could be some symbolic reasons, some family reasons. There are a host of other reasons that are not for me to judge, but you do have to understand the legal ramifications of it. So in addition to, like I said, just having the portions of assets like life insurance being given to my children, having a real estate, maybe you providing it to your child if that's something that you're interested in. Another asset that I see that I mentioned is that I see a lot of people putting their child's name. I mentioned copyright in music. I'm going to stay away from the celebrity stuff because that's a whole different ball game when people do that. But for the regular everyday layperson, I see people creating business entities and putting their child's name on a business entity because they want their child to be a real estate investor. They want their child to be a mini mogul. you are creating liability for this minor child. Again, a minor child cannot consent. It takes an adult to consent, but a minor child can own. And a minor child, in some cases, can be liable for the decisions of the adults, particularly in business. So if you are creating a business entity where you are putting a minor child on there as an owner, think about why and what it is that you're doing. Yes, you want that child to be a shareholder maybe, and maybe have some rights and some income in that business, but that child is also going to share in the liabilities in that business. And so that is a lot of pressure to put on yourself in decision making. And so a lot of this stuff sounds good, but the question at the end of the day is it really good? Now, let's say you do put a child's name on a real estate, or you do put a child's name on a business entity, and there is some kind of liability associated with that. The good part about it is that once that child does reach the age of the majority, they can dispute anything that may be on their credit report to say that it wasn't a decision that they had capacity to make as a minor, and therefore they should not be held liable for it. But who wants to go through that? I have seen minors who become the age of the majority. I have helped minors who become the age of the majority dispute certain transactions that were done by their parent or guardian in the vein of being good and being nice and doing something honorable, but not recognizing the ramifications of it. And it is a lot of work for an 18-year-old who, in most cases, in the cases where I've had to help the newly formed adult, was where they were either trying to get into college or trying to start a business venture, and they had this obstacle. And it was usually another adult that contacted me that was assisting the new adult, the 18-year-old, the 19-year-old, in trying to navigate the way of the world. And so how difficult is that for someone that young when things don't go good? Now, when they go good, great. You have a minor who has an asset that has appreciated. They have wealth that has been accrued on their behalf. And it's a good thing. They have something to start with. They have control. But what is the likelihood of it going well when you can just hold that asset for the benefit of that minor in your name until that person is 18? And so the last part I want to mention, this may not be the last part, but let's say it does go well. Let's say that you have this asset that is, you did all of the right things. Nothing went south. Nothing went sour. You have compounded wealth for this particular minor over the course of time. What happens? Well, when that minor reaches the age of the majority, depending on the situation, like I said, in some cases, in most cases, it's 18. In other cases, it's 21. That asset is that minor's, and they can do whatever they decide or desire to do with that asset at 18. So you are now in a scenario where you did the good and honorable thing. You held the asset. You increased the asset. It's of great value to this minor. And now this minor turns 18 and does what 18-year-olds do. And that is make a bunch of bad decisions along the road to wisdom. And so at 18, you as parent, you as custodian, you as guardian, whatever your hat is that you're wearing and holding the asset, it typically is going to fall by the wayside, and the immediate legal right, full access and full authority is vested in that 18-year-old. Well, did you have conversations? with the 18-year-old about the asset, about the house that you put in his or her name? Do they know there's a house in his or her name? They will know when they have to sign off on documentation because you can no longer sign as parent, guardian, or custodian. And when they find out, if you have not had the conversations with them, what exactly do you expect them to do? I expect an 18-year-old to be an 18-year-old, and that is to exercise their autonomy, to exercise their right. In the world of internet browsers, Google searches, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that he or she can go get a mortgage on the property, that he or she can decide to rent it out or to leave it alone. The fact of the matter is, once you put an asset in the name of that minor and that minor reaches the age of the majority, it is that person's asset. And so you no longer have the ability to control, maintain, or even have oversight. And all you can do as the honorable parent or adult in this situation is hope that you have developed someone who can make sound decisions with regard to the asset that you so honorably gave them. So you can kind of see where my position is on this. And that is, do not put real estate in the name of a minor unless there are some clear, just specific reasons why you would want to. I cannot imagine what those reasons are. It didn't matter if I had 20 parcels of real estate. I would not put any of them in my children's name. Sometimes I see people do it in a way of wanting the child to have the assets in lieu of divorce. There's a divorce. There's a couple that's no longer together, so they put the asset in the minor child's name. Again, the divorce did not terminate the legal and parental rights of the other parent, so that's not a good solution. And so again, think about what the purpose is when you have minor children and you want to give them larger things, give them more than an allowance. You want to put real estate in their name. You want them to own businesses. I don't believe everything. It used to be don't believe everything you see on TV. I don't even think anyone watches TV these days, but do not believe the things that you see on social media. Or do believe them, but don't buy into them as if they're good for you. Some things may be good for some people because of the circumstance that they have, but you need to know what is good for you, what is right for the minor for whom you have oversight. You need to know what is the purpose of the asset that you have. Why did you accumulate that asset, and why do you want this minor child to have it? Why should this minor child have an asset as a minor as opposed to them being an adult? And if you decide that you want this minor child to have an asset, what specifically are you doing to ensure that this child has the acumen, the ingenuity, the know-how, the wisdom to manage and not squander the thing that you are giving to them? What type of educational programs are you putting them in? What kind of lessons are you giving them? And that's up to you. Like I said, I utilize my children's custodial accounts as a way to monitor them so that they know when to spend, how to spend, so that they get it out their system. My child spent $250 on Amazon for her birthday, purchasing hair products and nail supplies. That's what she wanted to do with her birthday money, and she doesn't feel like it was wasted. And so I utilize that space to have conversations with her about her use of finance. What is she saving for? What are her goals? And so that's how I use custodial accounts. But again, those are custodial cash accounts. That's not real estate. I don't know that I would do that. I don't know that I would put real estate in a minor's name. Would I put my minors on one of my business entities? Maybe my 16-year-old. We have 2 years to 18. Maybe. It depends on how much risk I'm willing to expose her to. And also in conversation, how much risk is she willing to take on? Because it would be very unfair of me to invite her to the conversation or invite her into the business. It's not a risk that she's willing to take on as a minor, let alone an adult. So I encourage conversation first with professional advisors so that you understand the pros and the cons of giving assets to minors. I also encourage conversations with not only the minor, but any other adult who may have a legal responsibility and role as parent, guardian, or custodian of the child. And the last thing I'll say, and this is really the last thing, grandparents, do not give assets to your grandchildren without conversation, because there is a legal consequence for doing so. And I'll mention that more in later shows. It was great to have you join me. Feel free to log on to sherryfleming.com/Our Legacy Matters, and I'll see you again next week.
Talk in the day. Soul at night on the new 1010 WOLB.